Hello, and welcome to the Unit 4 practice test review. So, in this video, we're going to go over all the information that you need to know in preparation for the test. So, we're going to start off with vertex form. So, don't forget with vertex form, we've got H and K, and H is always our value inside the parentheses. So, in this case, it is 5, and then K is our value at the end, so it is 1. So our vertex will be at 5 and 1. From there, we want to make a table of values. And when we make that table of values, we want to keep in mind that once we know the vertex, we just want to pick points above and below. So 5, 1's going to be my vertex. I'm going to pick some numbers that are smaller and some numbers that are bigger. And because I know it's a parabola, these values should repeat. So I'm going to plug in 1. So parentheses 1 minus 5. Hit my squared button and then plus 1. And I get 17. That's a pretty big number. I can't fit that on this graph. Next, I'll plug in 2. And I get 10. I can plot to 10. And if you want to plot as you go, that is perfectly fine. Next, I'm going to plug in 3. And I get 5. And I get 2. So now I'm going to plug in the numbers on the opposite ends. And notice I get 2. I'm going to try one more. And I get 5. So once I see my numbers repeat, then I know 8 is 10 and 9 is 17. I'm only going to plot the numbers that I can fit on my graph. So I'm going to do 3, 5, 4, 2, 6, 2, 7, 5, and 8, 10. That gives me enough points where I can successfully draw my parabola. And don't forget to do arrows. Go ahead and take a moment and see if you can't do number 2 on your own once you locate the vertex and then make your table. So a couple things we want to note is that in our original vertex form, it's always x minus 3. So since it's x plus 3, we know the x value of our vertex is going to be negative 3, and the y value of the vertex is going to be negative 1. So our vertex will be at negative 3, negative 1. And then when we go to make our table of values, we'll put negative 3 in the middle, pick some numbers that are smaller than that, and pick numbers that are bigger than that. Also note there's a negative sign in front of our parentheses, which let us know that this particular parabola will be opening down instead of up. So when we plug in negative 6, we get negative 10. And we'll continue to plug in our values into our calculator. This is something we just want to take time so we can make as little mathematical errors as possible. And we always just want to wait until we see that negative pattern. So as we continue to plug in, eventually, when something is squared, we should see our values repeating. But just to be cautious, we can always continue to plug in just to make sure that we're plugging in our information correctly and have made no errors if possible. So we see it's repeating. So that means 0 would be negative 10. And we can go ahead and plot our points. So we'll plot negative 6, negative 10, negative 5 and negative 5, negative 4 and negative 2, And then again, we see that repeating patterns start to fly. And as we predicted, our parabola is opening down. And we were able to create our table of values all from the vertex. So the vertex can always be found in the center um, of your table. So that's where you want to place it. It's always going to be the center of your image. Now for 3 and 4, we're going to be using the x value vertex rule, which again, just a friendly reminder, is x is equal to negative b over 2a. And a is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is the number at the end. So when I plug it into this formula, I have negative parentheses negative 8 over 2 times our a value, which is 2. That simplifies to 8 over 4, which simplifies to 2. So when it comes to our vertex, we know that its x value will be at 2. So just like we did for the first two problems, we're going to make a table of values, and we know that our vertex will be when x is 2. We'll pick some numbers that are smaller than that and numbers that are bigger than that and plug them in. So I'm going to plug that into my equation. My first one is going to be negative 2 squared minus 8 times negative 2 plus 1. And I get an output of 25. That's pretty big. Then I'm going to plug in negative 1. And I get an output of 11. Then I'm going to plug in 0. And I get an output of 1. Then I'm going to plug in 1, and I'm just going to continue. And 2 should be our vertex. So it's either going to be our highest or lowest point. And since A is positive, it should be our lowest point. And hopefully as we plug in 3, we'll start to see our repeating pattern. But we never want to guess that we're going to see the repeating pattern. So we want to make sure that we're plugging in our numbers. And we get negative 5. And if you want to plug in one more, that 4, just to double check. And we get 1, then we will have 11 and 25. Now we can't plug in negative 225 and negative 111, but we can plug in 0, 1, 1, negative 5, 2, negative 7, 3, negative 5, and then 4 and 1. And our goal here is just to show the general idea of our parabola, that it is increasing rapidly on both sides from that vertex. And we'll repeat the same thing with number 4. One thing that's important to note is that A and B are present, but we do not see C. When you don't see a number at the end, it would be 0. So again, we have A and B, so we can still plug it into the vertex form. So negative parentheses negative 4 over 2 times negative 1. So that turns into 4 over negative 2, which reduces to negative 2. So when we go to make our table of values, our x value, or the vertex of our x value, would be at negative 2. Very important to make sure we pick numbers that are smaller than negative 2 and numbers that are bigger than negative 2, and plug it into our equation. So we have negative parentheses negative 5. So important to make sure that you are using parentheses when you evaluate, plus 4 times negative 5. And we get an output of negative 5. Then we have negative parentheses negative 4 squared minus 4 times negative 4. And we get 0. We'll continue on. Three. And it starts to repeat. 0 and then negative 5. Just to make sure I don't need to add additional number, I'm going to plug in 2. It's really important to know how far you need to go. And the only way to do that is to continue making table of values just to make sure that there was no more points that we could plot on this particular given graph. And then we didn't. And I get negative 12. So that's good. We have all the points on our graph that we can plot. So we're going to go to negative 5, negative 5, negative 4, 0, negative 3, 3, negative 2, 4, negative 1, 3, 0, 0, and then 1, negative 5. So because A is negative, it's open down as we predicted. We have our wonderful parabola with arrows included. It's all about making a table when it comes to this review. I just want to make sure we specify it's all about making a table of values. So we're continuing on. And for number 5 and 6, they do have the availability to identify the vertex. And instead of squared, it's cubed. So we're going to find our center or our vertex here. And our vertex is going to be at 1, 3. That's really important. Call it our vertex. It's our center. They just mean different things. So we're going to plot at 1, 3. Then I'm going to make a table of values just like I did before. And 1, 3 is going to be in the middle. Then I'm going to do some numbers before it. And I'm going to do some numbers after it. Keep in mind that my exponent is now cubed. So parentheses, negative 2 minus 1 to the third power, then plus 3. And I get negative 24. That's kind of too big to plot. Then I'm going to do negative 1. And because it's cubed, we're going to want to plug in every number just to make sure we are accurate. And I get negative 5. 0 minus 1 cubes plus 3. And I get 2. 2 minus 1 cubed. And I get 4. And I get 11. And it's already too big. I already am off my graph. So let's plot our points. We're going to plot negative 1, negative 5, 0, 2. We already have 1, 3. Now we're going to do 2, 4. And we can't even do 3, 11, but if we could, it would be somewhere out there. So hopefully you remember from a previous lesson that when we're dealing with a cubed graph, it makes like a little curvy line, almost like a snake, like an S shape. We're going to duplicate the same thing with number 6. So again, it's important to find kind of like that center point. So for here, our middle point is going to be 4, 1. Still using HK. So I'm going to make my table of values. 4, 1 is going to be in the middle. I'm going to pick some numbers that are smaller. some numbers that are bigger. And we're just going to see what happens. So if I do 0 minus 4 cubed and then plus 1, I get negative 63. Huge numbers. But I'm going to plug it in to make sure I don't miss anything. Negative 26, still big. Negative 7. 0. 2. 9. We'll do 7, but my guess is it's going to be too big. But just to make sure, we're going to go ahead and plug it in. So I can plot successfully 2, negative 7, 3, 0, 4, 1, 5, 2, 6, 9. So just like we talked about before, seeing that curved shape, and then put those arrows at the end, lets us know that this is a curved image. And this is a lot. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that this isn't a lot. This is a lot of taking time, sliding the points, and getting the information. But if you understand how to find your center, your vertex, your middle point in the table, you will be fine every time. So let's take a look at 2 more things that we underwent that also deal with finding that center point. So here, our center point is going to be at negative 2, negative 9. How do we know that? If I set the absolute value, that x plus 2 equal to 0, and solve, I get negative 2, and then the number at the end is our y value. So I'm going to put a point at negative 2, negative 9. And please, 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 if you did not watch my video from the other day, the lesson, Unit 4, Day 5, go ahead and watch that. And 3 kind of acts like our rate. That's telling us how much we're going to go each direction. So that 3 is telling me I'm going to go up 3, over to the right 1, up 3, over to the right 1, and I'm going to continue that process over and over again. It's also telling me to go up 3, over to the left, over to the left 1, over to the left. So it's giving me my rate the opposite direction as well to give me that V shape. And I'm just going to draw my line. So this is about understanding how to interpret similar information, but no matter what, it's letting me know how to set up. You can make a table of values here. I just don't feel like it's productive, but you could make a table of values. And the last one for graphing is square roots. And again, this is talked about in lesson 4-1. So we're going to set our discriminant here, x minus 5 equal to 0. And if we were to solve for that, we get negative 5. And then the number at the end would be our corresponding y value in that order pair. So we're going to be starting at negative 5, negative 4. What do you mean by starting? I'm going to make a table of values, and because it's a square root, I'm going to be starting with the value of negative 5 and then just continue to increase. So I can plug in negative 4, but I want to make sure that it only gives me absolute values. Perfect square root, sorry, not absolute values, perfect square roots. So negative 5 plus 5 gives me 0. 0 is a perfect square root. If I plugged in negative 4, negative 4 plus 5, right? So if I put a square root, let's plug this in. So 2, quit. There we go. Quit. So if we did 2, second square root, right? And I plug in -5 plus 5, and then did -4, I get -4. So I kind of wanted to show you that. Naturally, you would say, oh, let's plug in -3. I'm going to show you why -3 won't work, but let's show you on the calculator. So if I plug in -3 plus 5, and then I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do -4. I'm going to get a decimal because -3 plus 2, square root of 2, we don't know that. Same thing if I plug in -2. -2 plus 5 gives me square root of 3. I don't know that one either. What if I plug in -1? Well, -1 plus 5 gives me 4. I think that'll work out. And so you could keep plugging them in the calculator if you wanted to. -1 plus 5. Make sure you move your cursor over, and then -4. And it gives me a whole number of 0. So we've already done 4. Our next perfect square root would be 9. Well, what plus 5 gives me 9? 4. Square root of 4 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. So you're getting a little bit of understanding of how we do this and plot these points. You could make a whole list of values, but you would find you were crossing out a lot of them. And so this is one where it's really, really important that you know your square roots. Not the easiest concept, but it is very, very doable if you take your time. So we've got negative. Oh, I forgot when I plugged in -4. I didn't do that. So we need to do 2 parentheses, no, not parentheses, 2 square root. Let's plug in that -4 plus 5 minus 4, and we get -2. So I need to erase that. This is not as easy explaining it, but I wanted to make sure that I had a video that went over it. So if there was ever any questions about how to increase your score, I'm showing you true trial and error, and you can always reach out. And so I'm going to plot the point -4, -2, -1, 0, and then 4, 2. And again, when we're dealing with square roots, it is very important to understand that it is curved. We can never have a negative square root. If I try to plug in another number that is smaller than -5, it's going to say that it is a error, like it is not able, because then we're dealing with imaginary numbers. So we only have one more problem left in this review. Thank you for watching it. I know it's a little lengthy, but important. So a football was thrown across the field by a quarterback. So we want to start off by making a good old L-shaped graph. So a football was thrown across the field to the quarterback. His ball was thrown 50 yards across the field. So I'm going to throw my football. And that was 50 yards. And it reached a height of 20 feet. Okay. So we want to find the vertex of this image. And we've talked about this before in a couple of instances. And we're not going to worry about the feet versus yards. Let's disregard that. I'm not a football analysis or a pro. But we want to find the vertex. So we know the height has to be our y value. So that's going to be 20. But half of the length, so half of 50 would be where our vertex x value is at. So that would be 25. So in parentheses, 25 comma 20 would be my vertex. Now we're going to use that famous vertex equation of y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. And we've got some information we can plug in. First and foremost, we started at 0, 0. That's where we started at, 0, 0. That sounds like an x and a y value. So I'm going to replace y with 0. Then equals a, parentheses. My x value I'm also going to plug in is 0. And then that vertex that we just got in our image, so minus, so again, this is h and k, just so you're not confused. So h is 25. We'll square that. Sorry about the kids in the background. And then k is 20. And we're going to do all this so we can solve for a. So we're going to start off with 0 equals a times 625. That's what 25 squared is, plus 20. Next, we're going to subtract 20 from both sides, which gives us negative 20. And that's going to be equal to 625a, because we multiplied those two. Last, to get a by itself, we have to divide both sides by 625. Now, what I would encourage you to do is a couple things. One, recognize that your a value is going to be this fraction, but don't forget to redo. So I can divide those both by 5. So a is equal to negative 4. And then we need to take our calculator again and take 625 and divide it by, not multiply, but divide by 5. And we get 125. Once we have a, we're able to write our rule. That was really important to find a. So now we're able to write our rule. Let's write it in a fun color. Let's write it in blue. Y equals negative 4 over 125. I would keep it as a fraction. Parentheses, x minus 25 squared plus 20. That's your whole goal. You plug in the information that was given to you. You can always use the origin as your point. You're finding a just so you can write the rule in vertex form. So this unit is all about parabolas, word problem parabolas, graphs, and all the different things that they represent. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure you study this information, turn it in, and I will see you in the next video.